Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead, and welcome to episode 266, Book Completion Battle Plan. Today, I have been working on figuring out all that I have left to do on a book project I'm working on due March 1st. This episode is being recorded on February 5th of 2026, and so I have less than a month to go. February is the shortest month. And in a moment of panic, I thought I should just see how bad is it and what do I need to do? And I started thinking about how a book I wrote a couple of years ago, I mapped out a battle plan to get everything completed. So what I'm going to talk about today is some of the decision-making processes and just time realizations I'm making, some choices I'm going to have to make, and just to kind of walk through what happens when you're in the middle of a book project. You're coming up on the deadline, you're not finished. What are some things that you need to pay attention to? So that's what this episode's going to be about. If you're watching it on YouTube, you are actually seeing the battle plan itself. So if you're an audio listener, definitely check out this episode on our YouTube channel for Defend, Publish, and Lead, because you can see it on screen. I've talked about this before, but I always make my notes for projects and things like that in an online free notebook called Penzu. I'll put a link to that in the show notes if you want to check it out. But essentially what I did was I started looking at the month, and this is something that we do as a technique with lots of our writing clients, where we'll have clients look at the month and say, any days you cannot write, just put an X through them. So if you're printing out a calendar, put an X through it. If you have it in like a paper planner, just say, I'm not doing it. If you have an electronic calendar, maybe you're putting like an NW, like not writing. And so what I did was I looked at what's remaining of February. So again, today is February 5th. The manuscript is due March 1st. So I have 23 days left starting today. I think I have that right. I hope it's not leap year. I don't know. I did not look. And just the first thing that I'm looking at now is how many days am I not writing? I wrote down 8 that are days I wouldn't write. And these are on weekends. It's not that I couldn't do it. I actually, if I need to pull some weekend days, I will. But I know I have some travel on some of them. I have some family obligations on other ones. It's the Super Bowl on one of the Sundays. I'm probably not going to write that day. Even though my beloved Cleveland Browns are not in it, I will not probably be writing on the Super Bowl. So I just decided to just be very clear and say how many days are actually really left that I know I could get some work done. So realistically, I have 15 writing days. So 23 days minus the 8 I can't write. That leaves me with 15, I think. Hopefully my math is correct. And I have around 15,000 words, between 15,000 and 25,000 words to go. I don't like to think of my book projects in terms of words or pages. So I'm using this just as some shorthand to kind of figure out some things that need to happen. I always think of my book projects in sections, subsections. So for example, if my table of contents is divided up into, let's say, 32 sections, I like to think of it in that way versus words or pages, partially because the writing itself, sometimes I don't have trouble necessarily generating words, but I want to make sure that they're words that go in specific sections. And at least for me, it's hard to just keep track. Just having the right number of words, as we all know, does not mean you have good content. So one of the things I just figured out, if I had to divide it up, how many words a day do I need to be cranking out approximately, or I need to just double up on some days? So that's around 1,600 words a day. So, it's not insurmountable, but it's a lot. I'm at the point where I can't just get away with writing like 2 paragraphs and calling it a day. So a couple things that are top of mind to me. I started looking at those 15 days more closely to see how much time do I actually have in the 15 days. So one thing that's on my battle plan is a book I called Big Block Days. And I was really reassured that what I would consider big block days are days where I have at least 2 hours of writing or more. And most of these days, I actually had more than that. Actually, all of the days I had more than that. So I was really excited to see that. But I had 8 of these big block days, and most of them I have between like 8:30 a.m. and 2:30 p.m., which is a lot. I never have that kind of time, but I did think ahead a little bit and blocked out some days, just the full days around the deadline. So one of the things for those of you in the middle of writing like a big textbook or a dissertation or a big book project, one thing you could do is look ahead in your calendar and just block out big chunks really close to the deadline because you're probably going to need them. Some of it I did intentionally, and some of it just happened because I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I had a lot of overload in terms of classes for the fall, so I could have a lighter spring. So that's good. That's actually reassuring because that's quite a bit of time, like way more than I normally have. In any given week, I try to write somewhere between like 8 and 10 hours or 8 and 12 hours a week. And at least in some of these weeks, I'll be getting closer to like 15 or 16, which is great. So that was very reassuring. The other thing that was really nice is one of those big blocks is tomorrow. So I'm happy that I recognize that because I will do a lot to kind of protect my time to make sure that I'm using the big block days effectively. I also started tracking. I did not finish in time for this podcast, but I started also looking for little blocks, which to me are kind of pockets of time. I'm going to just make them like 40, between 45 minutes and like an hour and a half, because I also know in my schedule, I have some of those. I don't have a lot. I have some of them. And I know I also have, of course, like the little time confetti pieces that all of us have, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, whatever. But why I'm looking at those is because I'm at the point now where I'm generating new content in 2 chapters. I have lots of little things to do in all the other chapters. And so, how I'm thinking through completing this book, the very big block days, I'm going to use those as much as possible for generating new content and just making sure all the big structural pieces are in place. I have content for all of the chapters except for the last chapter. The last chapter to me will be, I think, a relatively easy one to write, so I saved it for last. But I know that just in general, there's structural things all over the place that have to be cleaned up. Like when I talk about something in one chapter, did I come back to it in other chapters and things like that? So I know one of these big block days, not tomorrow, but one of them, maybe in a couple of days, will be one where I actually look at the big structural picture and see where all my holes are. And that might mean that in one of my big block days, I'm actually going to print out the whole manuscript and read it. I usually do at least one full printout draft read. I don't like to kill a tree, but at least for me, I am better when I see it in print like the way it would be. This is actually going to be a print book, so I know for me it's more helpful to look at it that way. Something else I realized though is that it's unlikely that I'm going to be able to pull off making sure all my formatting is okay. And I have to use a Chicago notes style with like lots of little endnotes. And just, it's a style that I have worked with clients before, but it's been a while. And at least for me, I'm not fast when I do that. So I know, lucky me, with Defend, Publish, and Lead, just like our own clients, I also hire our coaches to help me. So I will be hiring one of our coaches to help me do some manuscript cleanup. But once I started thinking about it, is that the last big day or the last day I would want to give a coach a manuscript would be February 25th near the end of the day, because I want to give them at least 3 or 4 days to look at the whole thing. But I still have one good big block day on the 27th. So what I'm going to do is making sure that I have all the other chapters, table of contents, all the references, because I know those are probably a mess, all that kind of stuff. I want to have all together except for the very last chapter for the coach to look at and do all the edits and cleanup. And I will do my own editing on that one last chapter. So, one of the things that helps when you do something like this, when you're closing out on a big deadline, is just to get very clear about what kind of time is available to you. Had I discovered, if I looked in February and discovered I had like 3 big block days and nothing else, I definitely would have started clearing out a couple of weekend days and planned to use whole weekend days. I don't like to do it. I'm not a fan of using a whole day to binge. I don't like sitting that long. I just don't work as effectively that way. But had I needed to do it, I would do it. I also, if necessary, I started looking at some of the nights about, 4 or 5 days out from when the book is due to see, do I have any nighttime hours? I have pulled all-nighters. I don't like to do it, but I will. If I have a deadline and I need to meet it, I will do what I need to do to meet it. And so what I'm trying to do on the front end is figure out how much available time is open to me to get some of these bigger picture issues done. So if you're in one of these positions where you're working on a big project, one thing you could do, because February is a short month, is just to look, starting as soon as you listen to this podcast, just looking ahead and say, what days can I write? What days can't I write? And then see if you can find blocks of writing in there. For some of you, you only want to work 30 minutes a day or an hour a day, or you only can work that amount. But if you're somebody that likes slightly bigger blocks, like 2 hours or three, there's not that many days left in February. There's not that many days in February to begin with. So making sure that you can find some big blocks in there can be helpful. The other thing I was paying attention to, but when I was looking at my dates, was the frequency of how often those big blocks show up. So fortunately to me, many of them are like every other day or every 3 days. I want that to happen because that way I'm not going too long before having contact with my writing. There is a block in there between February 16th, when I have a big block, and February 23rd, when I don't have a block again until February 23rd. That's quite a bit of time that I only can work in very small chunks or not at all. So another thing that I noticed just from looking at this is I should, on February 16th, which I will definitely make a note about this, I need to take really good notes so I can get back in on the 23rd once I'm doing some of the hard mental load. So if you want to check out what I'm looking at, you definitely can see this on YouTube. Also, I know I've mentioned many times that our sponsor is the Textbook and Academic Authors Association, and registration is open for our summer TAA Institute to work on writing. I've talked about that a lot on the podcast and why it's really important. But another thing that's really helpful and why it's relevant for today when talking about a book completion battle plan is that they do focus on big projects like textbooks, scholarly monographs, and so on. And there's tons of free webinars and writing logs in there and just things to help you keep going on big projects when you can't do it. So one of those things is that will be discussed during the Textbook and Academic Authors Association Institute will be things like that, particularly for new scholars and for more experienced scholars. So I'm doing a session with mid-career people. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is the sense of how to navigate some of these large projects, like these kind of signature projects we want to do and how we want to think through time to completion. So if you like this kind of stuff that we're talking about on this podcast, I encourage you to check out Textbook and Academic Authors Summer Institute. Registration is open. So if you want to check that out, put a link in the show notes, and happy writing this week.